Socrates. Instead of trying to save his life during his trial by appeasing his judges, the Athenians, he further infuriated the jury as he always did, by accusing them of ignorance. Bold and combative, he incurred history's most renowned death penalty, and his proverbial statement, "An unexamined life is not worth living," has haunted Western thinkers ever since. But to whom did he address those words? The Athenians, or, ironically, himself? And what's happened since then? Has it been a life worth living? One thing is sure. The jury is us, and by the 21st century, we have become big believers in self-examination. Today, discussing self-awareness, knowing oneself, and listening to the heart, the higher self, or the entire universe are common slogans and part of popular culture. But do we truly make an effort to introspect? And if we do, what should it entail? Should we contemplate justice and virtue as Socrates did? Would that be enough? Or should we seek solace on a couch, paying a psychologist by the hour? What about confessing our sins to a priest? People have done it for ages. But did it work? And what about literature? Does reading count as examining life? Or watching movies? After all, we root for the heroes, feel their pain, and identify with their struggles. Catharsis was available to the Greeks. It was their invention. Yet Socrates didn't consider catharsis as a legitimate way of examining life. On the contrary, he was very much against it. We all sense he was right. An unexamined life is not worth living, but we are puzzled about what it means. Our philosophers, let alone ordinary men like us, have no idea what life is doing in the universe. The civilized man, the crown of creation, is as clueless as a squirrel. And because we cannot make up our minds about the purpose of life, we have no guidelines to find out what constitutes its examination. So let's talk about the meaning of life. We have progressed very little since the Greeks in this regard. Just like Socrates, we still believe that the purpose of life is eudaimonia, the ancient Greek word for well-being and happiness, which can be cultivated by developing virtues and reason. Socrates' intellectual grandson, Aristotle, argued that no matter our personal goals, they are only the means to an end, which is always the same: happiness. All we want is to be happy and do anything to achieve it. In Christianity, the purpose of life is often seen as worshipping God and preparing for an afterlife where people will be, of course, happy. Some philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill proposed that the purpose of life is to maximize happiness and minimize suffering. And yes, we are still reading Socrates' cookbook. Humanist philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that the purpose of life is rooted in human values, relationships, and the development of human potential. Existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that life lacks inherent meaning. They believed individuals must create their own purpose through their choices. According to evolutionary biology, life has no inherent purpose. It is a product of natural processes. Lex Fridman, a YouTuber, frequently asks his guests about the purpose of life in his podcasts, and some openly admit that they can't comprehend even the question. It is safe to conclude that Western civilization doesn't know what life is doing in the universe. But, surprise, the Mesoamerican does.
One of the most dramatic legacies the old sorcerers had left us was their discovery that the reason for the existence of all sentient beings is to enhance awareness. Awareness is an endless area of exploration for sorcerers and man in general. In order to enhance awareness, there is no risk we should not run, no means we should refuse. Bear in mind, however, that only in soundness of mind can awareness be enhanced.
There you have it. The purpose of life is to enhance awareness. And you either enhance your own awareness or the awareness of those who feed on you. Every individual of every species is invested in this business. because awareness is the currency of the universe. Awareness and life are the same. To be alive is to be aware, and to be aware is to be alive. The steak on your plate is to keep you aware. And if there is a cosmic viewpoint, and sorcerers say there is, the purpose of life from that perspective is the same: enhancing and harvesting all living beings' awareness. In Western civilization, we don't have the notion of different levels of human awareness. We distinguish a child from an adult, or an educated man from an ignorant, but we refer to a biological or cultural phenomenon. And awareness is neither. It is an energetic phenomenon. For the sake of simplicity, imagine that awareness is a liquid in a vessel that is a human being. The same man can be full of awareness or almost empty. Physiology doesn't show the difference. He looks the same in both cases, but his perceptual capabilities differ vastly. The left image is what we are familiar with. Everybody we know falls into this category. From the university professor to the bum in the street. They are both concerned with themselves only, because that little awareness at the level of their feet can do no more than think about itself. We all share this human condition. It shouldn't be surprising that sorcerers examine life to increase their awareness in order to move away from egomania and expand their perceptual realm. And they do it on purpose, and they do it strategically, through a practice called recapitulation. Recapitulation is a private practice in which the practitioner relieves her life experiences, the settings in which they took place, the words uttered, and most importantly, the feelings involved in those situations. The goal of the exercise is not to learn, understand, or find the cause of things, not even to change oneself. Instead, it employs the breath as a magical tool for cleansing the practitioner's energy field. The head moves gently from side to side, and the breathing fans the memory of the scene. The practitioner lifts all judgments and acknowledges what happened without holding anyone accountable. The exercise aims to recollect the scene and arrive at a new view from a different angle than initially experienced. This new view may be the perspective of a neutral observer or another person involved. The result is heightened awareness and detachment from one's personal story. For Socrates, however, examining life meant engaging in critical thinking using reason. The Socratic method involved a dialogue between a teacher, typically Socrates himself, and a student. Rather than providing direct answers, Socrates would ask probing questions to challenge the student's beliefs about a subject. Through this process, Socrates aimed to uncover inconsistencies in the student's thinking, ultimately leading to a deeper understanding and a more refined perspective. The difference between the Socratic method and the sorceric method is not small. The Socratic method requires a teacher who knows better than the student, whose life is being examined. The teacher must have some motivation to pamper the student, and that motivation is rarely genuine. It worsens as the Socratic method places the student at the center of the investigation, where his view is in the spotlight. The entire process is about whether he is right or wrong, understands or fails to understand, and learns or doesn't learn anything. It is all about the person himself. Metaphorically speaking, it puts the self in the king's palace, ties him to the throne, and calls the chain self-knowledge. On the other hand, the sorcerer's method of recapitulation allows one to leave the castle altogether and explore the outside world. Let's compare the two methods with an example. So, here is the story. A man found dead near a farmhouse in a ditch. The coroner says he died of dehydration, heat stroke, or both. But the report also says that the man's hands and legs were tied up, and he must have been agonizing for days before he died. The scene takes place in Naxos, Greece, in 399 BC. Euthyphro, the son of the farm's owner, is upset about the incident. He thinks his father is responsible, and when asked what happened, he points to another dead man lying on the field. "This dead man was killed by that dead man in a fit of rage," he says, "a few days ago when they were both drunk and alive. My father restrained and threw the killer into the ditch, allegedly wanting to hand him over to the authorities. What a moron! He knew he wouldn't survive." Euthyphro firmly believes that his father's actions were wrong in the eyes of the gods and feels a moral obligation to uphold justice, even if it means prosecuting a family member. The conflict between Euthyphro and his father is the backdrop for a philosophical discussion on piety between Socrates and Euthyphro, while they wait outside the courthouse. Socrates for his hearing, after which he will receive his well-known death penalty, and Euthyphro to prosecute his father. Socrates poses probing questions during the conversation to challenge Euthyphro's self-assured stance. While the dialogue is highly educational for us, the readers, Euthyphro fails to grasp its significance. He departs from the discussion without undergoing any transformative effect and proceeds with his plan. In other words, Socrates and his Socratic method failed to broaden Euthyphro's mind. Had Euthyphro recapitulated the events, he would have become aware of his overconfident righteousness and had a glimpse into his father's perspective that governed his actions. And as a byproduct, Euthyphro would have learned about his part in the man's death. For instance, he could have realized that by offering water and persuading his father to provide shelter, he could have saved the man's life if he had chosen to. But he didn't. What he wanted instead was to blame his father and punish him badly. He might have also recognized that this conflict with his father was not an isolated incident. Their animosity had a long history. Additionally, he could have acknowledged his tendency to judge and criticize not only his father, but also his friends, peers, and relatives. Furthermore, he might have come to the realization that he is not inherently better than the father he rebels against. Quite possibly, he shares many similarities with him. If Euthyphro had recapitulated the chain of similar quarrels, he would have increased his awareness by changing the underpinnings on which his ideas rested. And that energetic change sets recapitulation apart from the Socratic method and the various therapies developed by Western psychology. To sum it all up in a very simplified manner, the Socratic method aims to increase awareness by understanding through reason. Western therapies in general aim for the same understanding via emotions. In the Toltec practice of recapitulation, understanding is a byproduct, not the goal. And sorcerers believe that the first two methods don't produce permanent changes in consciousness. And now we must also take a closer look at Socrates. Had he recapitulated his life, he could have become aware of some of the following things. His physical ugliness and low-class birth made him feel inferior early in life. Thus he overcompensated in areas he could exceed, namely his intellectual aptitude and a relentless desire to prove it in debate, in which he always takes a convenient position. The innocent bystander who doesn't know a thing. He hides behind pretentious ignorance, even though he has already formed his often dogmatic views and has only one goal in the debate. And it is not the search for the truth, but to win the argument at all costs. For that, Socrates is not afraid to use lousy reasoning if he has to. Socrates is a passive-aggressive fellow who ensures the debate is conducted on his terms. And in those rare occasions when the opponent doesn't voluntarily comply, Socrates takes offense and threatens to leave. But he is also a great entertainer, knows how to manipulate people, and enjoys the support of his audience. A side note. Sorcerers classified the personality traits of the entire human race and found only 3 types. Socrates falls into the second category, who would rather die than yield, which he will prove shortly at his hearing in the courthouse.
People in this class are petty, vindictive, envious, jealous, self-centered. They talk exclusively about themselves and usually demand that people conform to their standards. They always take the initiative even though they are not comfortable with it. They are thoroughly ill at ease in every situation and never relax. They are insecure and are never pleased. The more insecure they become, the nastier they are. Their fatal flaw is that they would kill to be leaders.
It is no wonder that Socrates failed to broaden Euthyphro's mind. It was not his intention in the first place. All he wanted was another trophy. If he had been genuinely interested in knowledge, he wouldn't have relished setting up and defeating people so vehemently. These may be all true about Socrates, because he mistook definitions for knowledge. But judging him is unfair. He didn't have a chance to arrive at the energetic conclusions of the Mesoamerican sorcerers. Developing recapitulation and decoding the purpose of life wasn't an individual achievement for the ancient sorcerers either. An entire civilization and thousands of years of trial and error stood behind the discovery. Socrates didn't have those resources. He didn't know that awareness could be heightened, or if he did, he didn't understand how. The Socratic method didn't do the job. Following his footsteps, later generations of philosophers also failed to recognize awareness as the purpose of life. Because they didn't have access to the energetic aspect of reality, they made the pursuit of happiness the bedrock of our civilization. But sorcerers don't waste their time trying to be happy and don't beat themselves up for not making it. Instead, they strive to be impeccable at all times.